The text message arrived at exactly 3:47 p.m., just as I was loading my toolbox into the truck for what should have been a 3-day business trip to Chicago. Calla's coming over for girls' night. You'll be staying late at the conference, right? Rina. I stared at the screen, that familiar knot forming in my stomach. Finn Harlow, aviation engineer, small business owner, and apparently the world's most gullible husband. At 38, I thought I'd learned to read people better. Guess not. My workshop sat behind our house like a monument to everything I'd built with my own hands. Custom cabinets, restored furniture, half-finished projects that Rina called Finn's obsessions. She never understood that working with wood and metal cleared my head, helped me think through problems. Right now, I had a big one. Instead of heading to the airport, I pulled into Tommy Brennan's driveway. Tommy ran a small private investigation firm downtown, and we'd been friends since high school. His house looked like something from a detective novel. Peeling paint, newspapers scattered on the porch, the kind of place where secrets went to get solved. Finn? Tommy opened the door, coffee mug in hand, eyebrows raised. Thought you were flying out today. Change of plans. I handed him my phone, showing Rina's message. How long would it take you to check phone records? Tommy's weathered face cracked into a knowing smile. Depends what you're looking for, and how much you really want to know. Everything. 2 hours later, we sat in Tommy's cluttered office, surrounded by manila folders and the smell of stale coffee. The evidence spread across his desk like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too trusting to assemble. Your wife's been busy, Tommy said, sliding a stack of printed phone logs toward me. Calla Torin, her supposed best friend, has been texting and calling Rina almost daily for 6 months. But here's the interesting part. They're also both in contact with someone else. Same number, different times. I scanned the records, my engineering mind automatically organizing the data. Patterns emerged like blueprints. Who's the third party? Still working on that. But Finn? Tommy leaned back in his chair. These aren't random social calls. Look at the timing. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. Always when I was at client meetings or working late. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. There's more. Tommy pulled out another folder. Bank records. Rina's been making cash withdrawals, small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts, but consistent. And Calla's been depositing similar amounts into a separate account. Blackmail? Or payment for services rendered? Tommy's expression was grim. Either way, your wife's playing games you don't know about. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked Main Street. Our small Minnesota city looked peaceful from here. Tree-lined streets, local businesses, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where reputations mattered. I need to see this for myself. Finn, be careful. If you're right about what's happening, I'm going home. I grabbed the phone records. And I'm bringing backup. 20 minutes later, I sat in my truck outside Mason Redden's apartment building. Mason was Calla's husband, a decent guy who worked construction and probably deserved better than what he was getting. Like me, apparently. He answered his door in work clothes, dirt under his fingernails, genuine surprise on his face. Finn? What's going on? We need to talk about our wives. Mason's expression shifted, something flickering behind his eyes. Not surprise, recognition. He already suspected. Come in. He stepped aside, and I entered their small apartment. Unlike our perfectly decorated house, this place felt lived in, real. Pictures on the refrigerator, boots by the door, a life that wasn't staged for appearances. Mason, when's the last time Calla mentioned spending time with Rina? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. He sat heavily on their couch. Every week, girls' night, shopping trips, spa days. His voice carried a weight I recognized. But she comes home different afterward. Secretive, like she's hiding something. I showed him the phone records, watched his face change as he processed the information. "That number," he said, pointing to the third contact. "I've seen it before, on Calla's phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Any idea who it belongs to?" Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Calla works part-time at that medical tech company downtown. Same place where Rina's in PR. There's this guy, older, executive type, always seemed too friendly when I'd pick Calla up from company parties." The pieces clicked into place with mechanical precision. My wife, her friend, and someone with money and power. A triangle that didn't include the husbands. "Mason, how would you feel about finding out the truth? Tonight?" He met my eyes, and I saw the same determination I felt building in my chest. "What did you have in mind?" "A surprise visit. But first, I need to make one more call." Elias Corvin answered his phone on the second ring. My lawyer had a voice like gravel and a mind like a steel trap. At 45, he'd seen enough divorce cases to know where this was heading before I did. "Finn, thought you were traveling this week. Plans changed. Elias, I need you to meet me at my house in an hour and bring your recording equipment." "What's the situation?" "The kind that ends marriages and starts new lives." An hour later, the three of us stood on my front porch. My house looked perfect in the evening light. Manicured lawn, fresh paint, the American dream in suburban form. Too bad the dream was about to become a nightmare. I slid my key into the lock, turned it slowly. The house was quiet except for voices coming from the living room. Rina's laugh, higher pitched than usual. Calla's voice, lower, more intimate. And a third voice, male, confident, unfamiliar. Elias held up his small recording device, nodded. Mason's jaw was clenched, hands balled into fists. We walked through my own front door like intruders in our own lives. The living room scene stopped us cold. Rina and Calla sat close together on our couch, a man in an expensive suit between them. Papers spread on the coffee table, champagne glasses, the atmosphere of celebration. They looked up as we entered, and I watched three faces cycle through surprise, panic, and calculation in the span of seconds. "Finn!" Rina jumped up, her voice artificially bright. "You're supposed to be in Chicago." "Apparently, I'm supposed to be a lot of things." I looked at the man in the suit, silver hair, manicured hands, the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. "And you are?" "Richard Ashford," he said, standing but not offering his hand. "I work with your wife." "Work with her how, exactly?" Mason stepped forward, his construction worker's build suddenly seeming more intimidating in our suburban living room. Calla had gone pale, clutching a champagne glass like a lifeline. "Mason, what are you doing here?" "Learning about my wife's hobbies." Mason's voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt underneath. "Turns out she's been busier than I thought." Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Oh, we're going to discuss it," I interrupted. "All of it. Starting with why my wife is having champagne celebrations with her boss while I'm supposed to be out of town." Rina's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Calculation. Cold, careful planning. "Finn, you're being paranoid. Richard came over to discuss a promotion opportunity. At 7 p.m. on a Thursday, with champagne?" I gestured to the papers on the table. "What kind of promotion requires this much paperwork?" Elias stepped forward, his lawyer instincts taking over. "Mr. Ashford, I'm Finn's attorney. Perhaps you could explain your business here?" The room went silent except for the tick of our grandfather clock. 4 men, 2 women, and enough tension to power the entire neighborhood. Richard straightened his tie, a gesture that screamed guilt to anyone paying attention. "This is a private matter." "Not anymore." I pulled out the phone records, spread them on the table next to whatever documents they'd been reviewing. 6 months of calls, texts, and cash transactions. 3 people, 2 marriages, and one very interesting pattern. Rina grabbed for the papers, but I was faster. Where did you get these? Does it matter? What matters is what they show. I looked at Mason, who was staring at Calla with an expression I recognized, the moment when suspicion becomes certainty. Calla. Mason's voice was quiet. Tell me what's really going on. She burst into tears, but they felt performative, calculated. Mason, I can explain. Then explain. He sat down across from her, suddenly looking exhausted. Explain why you've been lying to me for months. I watched Rina during this exchange, saw her mind working behind her eyes. She was planning something, calculating her next move. After 12 years of marriage, I finally saw my wife clearly. Not the woman I'd fallen in love with, but the strategist she'd become. Finn, she said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when she wanted something. You're misunderstanding the situation. Richard and I work together, and Calla's been helping with some projects. What kind of projects require secret meetings and cash payments? Richard stood up, reaching for his jacket. I think I should leave. Sit down. The command came out harder than I'd intended, but it worked. Something in my voice made him freeze. Elias spoke up. Mr. Ashford, as an attorney, I should inform you that leaving now might be seen as an admission of guilt. If there are business improprieties involved. There are no improprieties, Rina's composure cracked. This is harassment. This is my house. I looked around the room, at the furniture I'd helped choose, the pictures of our life together, the carefully constructed facade of our marriage. And these are my questions. So let's start with an easy one. Richard, how long have you been sleeping with my wife? The silence that followed my question felt like standing in the eye of a tornado. Richard's face went through several shades of pale. Rina's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and Calla's tears suddenly seemed a lot more genuine. Mason broke the silence first. Jesus Christ, Calla. Is that what this is about? It's not what you think, she started, but Mason held up his hand. Then tell me what to think, because right now, I'm thinking my wife has been helping my friend's wife cheat on him, for money. I had to admire Mason's directness. Construction work apparently taught you to cut through the nonsense and get to the foundation of things. Richard finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. I'm a respected executive. With a wife and kids of your own, I'm betting. Elias pulled out his phone. Richard Ashford, VP of Strategic Development at MedTech Solutions, married to Patricia Ashford for 18 years, 2 children in private school. He looked up from his screen. Should I call Patricia and ask her opinion about this meeting? The color drained from Richard's face completely. You can't. Actually, I can. It's all public information. Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The question is whether I need to. I looked at Rina, really looked at her. The woman I'd married had been spontaneous, laughing, full of dreams about our future together. This woman was calculating every word, every expression, looking for the angle that would get her out of trouble. Rina, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want the truth. Are you having an affair with Richard? She lifted her chin in that defiant gesture I used to find attractive. And what if I am? What are you going to do about it? The honesty was almost refreshing. After months of suspicion and doubt, finally getting a straight answer felt like taking off shoes that were too tight. Well, I said, settling into my favorite chair, that depends on what else you've been lying about. I pulled out the bank records Tommy had provided. These cash withdrawals, for instance. 500 here, 300 there, always on days when you were supposedly with Calla. Those are personal expenses. Paid to Calla for what services exactly? I looked at Mason's wife, who was now crying in earnest. Calla, what has my wife been paying you for? Mason leaned forward. Calla, Answer him. She looked between Rina and Richard like she was hoping one of them would save her. I was just helping. She was providing alibis, Richard said suddenly. When Rina and I needed to meet, Calla would cover for her. Tell you they were together when they weren't. Mason stood up so fast his chair tipped over. You paid my wife to lie for you? Mason, please. Calla reached for him, but he stepped back. How much? His voice was quiet. How much was my marriage worth to you people? I found myself feeling sorry for Mason. At least I'd suspected something was wrong. He'd been completely blindsided by the scope of the deception. It wasn't like that, Rina said, but her voice lacked conviction. Calla needed the money, and it was just small favors. Small favors? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like lying to her husband, like helping you destroy our marriage, like turning our friend into an accomplice. Richard was edging toward the door again. I really think I should… Richard. I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone stopped him. Sit down. We're not finished. Elias cleared his throat. Mr. Ashford, I should mention that leaving now after these revelations could be seen as abandonment of the situation. If there are workplace ethics violations, or if Mrs. Harlow has been using company resources for personal affairs. I haven't used company resources, Rina snapped. Company time? Elias asked mildly. Company property? Company relationships? The legal implications were starting to dawn on Richard's face. A VP having an affair with a subordinate, using work as cover, potentially creating liability for the company. His career was hanging by a thread, and he was just realizing it. What do you want? He asked finally. I want the truth. All of it. I looked around the room. How long has this been going on? How many lies have you told? What else don't I know? Rina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, harder, more honest than I'd heard in years. 8 months. It started at the company retreat last fall. Mason sank back into his chair. 8 months. Calla, you've been lying to me for 8 months? I needed the money, she whispered. My hours got cut at work, and we were behind on rent. So you sold our marriage instead of talking to me? Mason's hurt was palpable. Instead of asking for help? I understood his pain, but I had bigger questions. What else, Rina? What other lies should I know about? She was quiet, but Richard wasn't. The pressure was getting to him. She's been using your workshop, he said suddenly. When you're at client sites, we've met there. I felt something cold settle in my chest. My workshop, the place where I built things, created things, the space that was entirely mine, contaminated by their lies. In my workshop. I kept my voice level, but inside, I was calculating. Where else? Finn, Rina started. Where else? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Hotels. My apartment when Patricia's traveling. Richard seemed to be confessing everything now, like a dam had burst. The office after hours. Elias was taking notes, his pen moving steadily across his legal pad. Mr. Ashford, you're aware that using company property for personal relationships could constitute grounds for termination? You can't tell Patricia, Richard said suddenly, or the company. I'll lose everything. I looked at this man, successful, confident, powerful, reduced to begging strangers not to destroy his life. The same life he'd been risking for 8 months with my wife. Richard, you should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair with a married subordinate in company facilities. What do you want? Rina asked. Money? I'll leave quietly. We'll get divorced. You can have the house. I don't want your guilt offerings. I stood up, walked to the window that looked out over our neighborhood. I want consequences. What kind of consequences? Elias asked, his lawyer instincts engaged. I turned back to face the room. 3 guilty parties, 1 betrayed husband, 1 attorney, and a whole lot of decisions to make. The kind that makes sure this never happens to anyone else. Richard was sweating now. What does that mean? It means, Richard, that your wife deserves to know what kind of man she's married to. Your company deserves to know what kind of executive they've promoted. And the community deserves to know what kind of people they've been trusting. You can't be serious, Rina said. You'd destroy all our lives over this? I'm not destroying anything. You already did that. I looked at each of them in turn. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you destroyed. Mason spoke up quietly. What about Calla? What happens to her? I looked at his wife, still crying, still hoping someone would save her from the consequences of her choices. That's up to you, Mason. But she made her choice when she decided your marriage was worth $500 a month. The room fell quiet again. Outside, I could hear normal life continuing, cars driving past, neighbors walking dogs, the everyday sounds of people living honest lives. So what happens now? Richard asked. I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Now, Richard, you're going to learn what it feels like to be the underdog. The next morning, I sat in my truck outside MedTech Solutions at 7:30 a.m., watching employees arrive for work. Richard pulled into his reserved parking spot in a silver BMW that probably cost more than Mason made in a year. He looked tired, stressed, like a man who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling. Good. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Got the info you wanted. Patricia Ashford, 42, works part-time at the Children's Library, volunteers at St. Mark's Church. Clean social media, family photos, looks like the real deal. Want me to make contact? I typed back, not yet, still gathering ammunition. Through my windshield, I watched Rina's car pull into the employee lot. She sat for a moment before getting out, probably steeling herself for whatever conversation she'd planned to have with Richard. They'd had all night to coordinate their story, figure out damage control. Too bad I'd been planning too. At 8:15, I walked into the MedTech lobby. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile, looked up expectantly. I'd like to speak with someone in human resources, please, about a workplace conduct issue. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Janet Morrison, HR director, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every workplace drama imaginable. Mr. Harlow, you mentioned a conduct issue involving your wife and her supervisor? I slid a folder across her desk. My wife Rina and VP Richard Ashford have been having an affair for 8 months. They've used company facilities, company time, and company events as cover. I have documentation. Janet opened the folder, her expression growing more serious as she reviewed the phone records, timeline, and Elias's preliminary legal assessment. This is quite serious, she said finally. If proven, it would violate several company policies. Do you have any direct evidence of workplace impropriety? Richard admitted to using the office after hours and company events as meeting opportunities. I have a recording. Her eyebrows rose. A recording? I pulled out my phone, played the relevant section from last night's confrontation. Richard's voice came through clearly. Hotels. My apartment when Patricia's traveling. The office after hours. Janet listened twice, taking notes. Mr. Harlow, I need to ask, what outcome are you seeking here? I want accountability. My wife made her choices, and I'll handle that through divorce proceedings. But Richard abused his position of authority, violated company policy, and put MedTech at legal risk. That's your problem to solve. She nodded slowly. We'll need to conduct a full investigation. That means interviewing both parties, reviewing security footage, examining computer access logs. It could take several weeks. I understand. But Janet? I leaned forward. Richard knows I was here yesterday. He's had time to cover his tracks, coordinate stories, maybe even coach other employees. If you're going to investigate, I'd suggest moving quickly. What makes you think he'd try to cover things up? I smiled grimly. Because that's what guilty people do, and Richard Ashford has a lot to be guilty about. An hour later, I was back in my truck when my phone rang. Rina's name on the caller ID. Finn, what did you do? Good morning to you too, darling wife. Richard just got called into an emergency HR meeting. They're asking about our working relationship. Imagine that. It's almost like actions have consequences. You bastard. You're trying to destroy his career. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm succeeding. I started the truck, pulled out of the parking lot. Richard destroyed his own career when he decided to have an affair with a subordinate. I'm just making sure the right people know about it. This won't just hurt him, it'll hurt me too. I could lose my job. Yes, you could. Amazing how that works. There was a long pause. When Rina spoke again, her voice was different, calculating, threatening. Finn, if you don't back off, I'll make sure you regret it. I know things about your business, your clients. I could make your life very difficult. Rina, let me explain something to you. For 12 years, I've been the nice guy, the understanding husband, the one who compromised, who gave in, who tried to make you happy. That guy is gone. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. You gave up the right to negotiate when you started screwing your boss in my workshop. I hung up and immediately called Elias. She just threatened me, I said when he answered. Professional retaliation, sabotaging my business relationships. Good. I was hoping she'd do something stupid. I could hear him typing. That gives us grounds for a restraining order if needed, plus, it shows intent to cause financial harm. How's the HR situation developing? In progress. What's our next move? Depends how far you want to take this. We could pursue a civil suit against Richard for alienation of affection, interference with marriage. Minnesota allows it under certain circumstances. What would that accomplish? Financial damages, public record of the affair, professional consequences. Plus, it would require discovery. We'd get access to company emails, phone records, hotel receipts. Everything. I thought about Richard's panicked face last night, his desperate plea not to tell his wife. Do it. Finn, are you sure? This will get messy, public. There's no going back once we file. Elias, they spent 8 months making a fool of me. Lying to my face, using my property, corrupting my friends. I'm not interested in going back. All right, I'll start drafting the paperwork. What about Mason? Is he interested in pursuing anything against Calla? I don't know. He's processing. But Elias, make sure our case includes Calla's role as paid accomplice. I want all of it on the record. After ending the call, I drove to Mason's apartment. I found him sitting on his front steps, still in yesterday's clothes, looking like he hadn't slept. Rough night? I asked, settling beside him. She's gone. Packed a bag. Went to stay with her sister. He rubbed his face with both hands. 26 years old, and I feel like my life is over. It's not over, it's just different now. How are you handling this so well? Your wife cheated on you for 8 months, and you seem almost relieved. I considered the question. Because now I know. For months, I felt like I was going crazy, sensing something was wrong but having no proof. The uncertainty was worse than the truth. What happens now? Now we make sure they face consequences for what they did. I told him about the HR complaint, the potential civil suit. Mason, I need to ask, do you want to pursue legal action against Calla? She took money to help destroy our marriages. That's not just adultery, it's conspiracy. He was quiet for a long time. I loved her, Finn. I really loved her. I know. But love doesn't mean accepting being treated like garbage. What would legal action accomplish? Accountability. And it would send a message that marriage vows mean something, that you can't just buy your way out of consequences. Mason stood up, walked to the edge of his small yard. She said she needed the money, that we were struggling. Were you? Yeah, but not desperately. We could have figured it out. I would have taken extra shifts, found a second job. We could have talked to family. He turned back to me. She chose the easy money instead of trusting her husband. So what do you want to do about it? He looked at me with something I hadn't seen before: determination. I want her to understand that choices have consequences. All of them. That afternoon, I met with Tommy at his office to review the additional information he'd gathered. Patricia Ashford is exactly what she appears to be, he said, sliding photos across his desk. Devoted wife, mother, community volunteer. She has no idea what her husband's been doing. The photos showed a woman at various community events, church functions, school fundraisers, library programs. In every picture, she looked genuinely happy, proud to be supporting her community. Any idea how she'd handle learning the truth? Based on what I've observed, she'd be devastated but strong, the type who'd demand accountability. Tommy leaned back in his chair. Finn, are you sure you want to destroy this woman's life to get revenge on her husband? It was a fair question. Patricia Ashford was an innocent victim in this mess, just like Mason and me. But she was also married to a man who was actively deceiving her, putting her at risk for public humiliation and potential legal liability. Tommy, if your wife was cheating on you, wouldn't you want to know? Yeah, but... Then Patricia deserves the same consideration. She deserves to make informed decisions about her marriage, her future, her health. Richard took that choice away from her. Tommy nodded slowly. When do you want me to make contact? Soon, but first, I want to see how Richard handles the pressure at work. If he comes clean voluntarily, tells his wife himself, maybe we can avoid the nuclear option. And if he doesn't? Then Patricia Ashford gets to learn what kind of man she married, and Richard gets to learn what it feels like when your whole world falls apart. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Calla. We need to talk. Can you meet me at Riverside Park at 6 p.m.? Please, it's important. I showed the message to Tommy. What do you think? I think Calla's panicking and looking for a way out. Could be useful. Or it could be a setup. Maybe Rina put her up to it. Only one way to find out. But Finn, be careful. Desperate people do stupid things. At 5:45 p.m., I parked near Riverside Park's main pavilion. The park was nearly empty. A few joggers, an elderly couple feeding ducks, normal evening activity. I spotted Calla sitting alone at a picnic table near the water, looking small and miserable. I approached cautiously, every sense alert for signs of ambush or deception. Calla. She looked up, and I saw that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, her usual put-together appearance completely undone. Finn, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want? I want to apologize, and I want to tell you the truth. All of it. I sat across from her, maintaining distance, keeping my expression neutral. I'm listening. It started 6 months ago, not 8. Rina lied about that too. Calla's voice was shaky but determined. She approached me after my hours got cut at the store, said she needed help with a situation and was willing to pay. What kind of situation? She said you were getting suspicious, asking questions about her schedule. She needed someone to provide alibis, cover stories. At first it seemed harmless. Just tell you we went shopping when we didn't, that sort of thing. But it escalated. Richard got paranoid, started wanting more elaborate covers. Company parties where I'd have to lie about where Rina was, fake girls' weekends, even using Mason as an unwitting alibi by having him drop me off at places where I'd meet Rina and then lie about what we did. The scope of the deception was staggering. They'd turned Mason into an accomplice without him knowing it, used his trust and love for his wife as a weapon against both our marriages. How much did they pay you? $500 a month at first, then more when the lies got bigger. By the end, it was almost $800. She wiped her eyes. Finn, I know how it sounds, but we really needed the money. Did you need it more than your marriage? I thought I could handle it. I thought Mason would never find out. and the money would help us get ahead. I didn't think about what it would do to you, or to him, or to us. What changed your mind? Last night. Seeing Mason's face when he realized what I'd done, seeing how much I'd hurt him. She looked across the park, toward the river, and seeing how Rina reacted when you confronted her. What do you mean? She wasn't sorry, Finn. She wasn't guilty or ashamed. She was angry that she got caught. And when Richard started panicking about his career, about his wife finding out, Rina just calculated, like she was already planning her next move. This matched what I'd observed, but hearing it from someone who'd been working with Rina for months was chilling. What's her next move? I don't know for sure, but she's been asking questions about your business, your clients, your finances, and she's been talking to Richard about ways to minimize the damage to themselves. At my expense? At everyone's expense. Finn, she's not the woman you married anymore. I don't know if she ever was. Calla reached into her purse, pulled out a thick envelope. This is everything. Bank statements showing the payments, text messages, emails, photos from events where we lied about what we were doing. Everything I can think of that might help you. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Why are you doing this? Because Mason deserves better. Because you deserve better. And because I'm tired of being part of something ugly. She stood up, gathering her purse. Finn, I know you have no reason to trust me, but be careful. Rina's planning something and she's not going to go down quietly. What about you and Mason? I don't know. He won't talk to me, won't answer my calls. I'm staying with my sister until he decides what he wants to do. She paused. I love him. I know I screwed up, but I love him. I hope that counts for something. After she left, I sat alone at the picnic table, watching the river flow past. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. More evidence, more proof of the elaborate deception that had been my marriage. My phone rang. Elias. Finn, we have a problem. Rina just filed a restraining order against you. Claims you threatened her, that she fears for her safety. That's ridiculous. I never threatened her. I know, but she's claiming emotional abuse, intimidation, harassment. The judge granted a temporary order. You can't go to the house, can't contact her directly, can't go to her workplace. I felt the ground shift under my feet. She's trying to control the narrative. Exactly. If she can paint you as the aggressor, it changes everything. Makes her look like the victim instead of the cheater. Can we fight it? Yes, but it'll take time. Meanwhile, she's got legal cover to do whatever she wants. And Finn, there's more. She's hired Patricia Goldman as her attorney. I recognized the name. Patricia Goldman was known for aggressive divorce tactics, for destroying husbands in court, for turning cheating wives into sympathetic victims. How fast can this escalate? Very fast. With the restraining order in place, she can claim abandonment, file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse, potentially get temporary custody of assets pending resolution. We don't have kids. No, but you have property, business assets, retirement accounts. She could freeze everything while the case drags through court. I looked out over the peaceful river, thinking about how quickly everything was changing. Yesterday, I'd been the wronged husband seeking justice. Today, I was apparently a dangerous man who needed to be restrained by law enforcement. Elias, she's not just trying to minimize damage, she's going on the offensive. Looks that way. What do you want to do? I opened Calla's envelope, scanned the documents inside. Bank records, text messages, photos, a complete record of the conspiracy that had destroyed my marriage. I want to fight back, but first, I want to make sure Richard understands what he's gotten himself into. What do you mean? I mean it's time for Patricia Ashford to learn the truth about her husband. And time for MedTech to understand what kind of liability they're facing. Finn, be careful. With the restraining order in place, anything you do will be scrutinized. If it looks like retaliation or harassment, it won't. It'll look like a concerned citizen making sure the truth comes to light. I hung up and immediately called Tommy. Change of plans. We're accelerating the timeline. I need you to contact Patricia Ashford tonight. What happened? Rina just declared war. Time to make sure she understands what that means. Tommy's call came at 8:30 a.m. the next morning, while I was having coffee in a hotel room that had become my temporary home thanks to Rina's restraining order. I met with Patricia Ashford last night, he said without preamble. Finn, you need to see this woman's reaction. She wants to meet with you. That could be complicated. The restraining order doesn't apply to Richard's wife, and she's not asking for a social visit. She wants to coordinate our response. An hour later, I sat in Tommy's office across from Patricia Ashford. In person, she was even more impressive than in the photos. Composed, intelligent, with the kind of quiet strength that came from years of holding a family together. Mr. Harlow, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention, and I want to apologize for my husband's behavior. Mrs. Ashford, you don't need to apologize for anything. You're as much a victim here as anyone. Perhaps, but I'm not interested in being a victim. Her voice was steady, determined. I'm interested in making sure Richard faces appropriate consequences for his choices. She opened a briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents. After Mr. Brennan left last night, I spent some time reviewing our financial records, Richard's travel schedule, credit card statements. I found some interesting patterns. The papers she spread across Tommy's desk told a story of systematic deception, hotel charges on nights when Richard claimed to be working late, restaurant bills for two when he was supposedly in solo meetings, cash advances that corresponded perfectly with the timeline Tommy had established. There's more, Patricia continued. I found a second phone in Richard's car, prepaid, hidden in the glove compartment. The call log matches the numbers in your evidence. You've been busy, Tommy observed. I've been thorough. 22 years of marriage teaches you to be thorough. Patricia's smile was cold. I also called our family attorney. Did you know that adultery affects asset distribution in Minnesota divorces? I was beginning to understand why Richard had been so panicked about his wife finding out. Patricia Ashford wasn't just going to be hurt and heartbroken, she was going to be strategic. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking that Richard has made some very expensive mistakes. The affair itself, the misuse of company resources, the lies to his family, it all adds up to a man who's demonstrated poor judgment and questionable character. She pulled out another document. This is a letter I'm sending to MedTech's board of directors today. It outlines Richard's conduct, the potential liability to the company, and my concerns about his fitness for executive responsibility. Tommy whistled softly. That'll end his career. Good. Men who abuse positions of trust shouldn't have positions of trust. Patricia looked at me directly. Mr. Harlow, I understand your wife has filed a restraining order against you. Her attorney's trying to control the narrative. Paint me as the aggressor. How would you feel about having an ally in that fight? Someone who can speak to Richard's pattern of deception and manipulation? What do you mean? I mean that, if Rina Harlow is going to claim she's a victim, the court should hear from Richard's actual victim. Someone who can testify to his character, his methods, his willingness to lie and manipulate to get what he wants. The implications were staggering. Patricia wasn't just going after Richard, she was offering to help destroy Rina's legal strategy. Mrs. Ashford, are you sure you want to get involved in our divorce proceedings? Mr. Harlow, your wife helped destroy my marriage. She participated in a conspiracy that turned my husband into a liar and put my family at risk. I'm already involved. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mason. Can you meet me at Murphy's Bar at noon? I have news. Murphy's Bar was a working-class place near the construction sites where Mason spent his days. Dark wood, honest drinks, the kind of place where men went to think through serious problems. I found Mason in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 days. How are you holding up? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Calla came by this morning, wanted to talk, to explain, to apologize. He took a long drink. She brought papers. What kind of papers? Divorce papers. Already filed, already served. Mason's laugh was bitter. Turns out she's not just sorry, she's strategic. She filed for divorce? Gets better. She's claiming I was emotionally distant, that she felt neglected and unappreciated. According to her attorney, the affair was a symptom of problems in our marriage, not the cause. The pattern was becoming clear. Both women were using the same playbook: file first, claim victimhood, control the narrative. Mason, I'm sorry. Don't be, it clarifies things. He signaled the bartender for another beer. Finn, I've been thinking about what you said, about consequences, about accountability. I want in. What do you mean? I mean, I want to fight back. Not just in divorce court, I want everyone to know what they did, what all of them did. Mason pulled out his phone, showed me a social media post. Calla's smiling face, a caption about new beginnings and finding happiness, posted this morning while she was supposedly devastated about our confrontation. She's already moved on, Mason said, already spinning the story, making it sound like she's the brave woman who escaped a bad marriage. What do you want to do about it? I want the truth to come out, all of it. I want people to know that she took money to help destroy our friend's marriage. I want her family to know, her friends, her co-workers, everyone. I understood the impulse, but Mason was talking about a scorched earth approach that could backfire. Mason, be careful. If you go too public too fast, it could hurt your divorce case. Finn, I don't care about the divorce case anymore. I care about making sure people know who they're really dealing with. He had a point. Both Rina and Calla were already working to control public perception, to paint themselves as victims rather than conspirators. Maybe it was time to make sure the community heard the other side of the story. What did you have in mind? Mason smiled for the first time since this whole mess started. I was thinking about a little public education campaign. Social media, word of mouth, maybe some flyers around town. Just making sure people have all the facts. That could get messy. Messier than it already is? Mason finished his beer. Finn, they declared war when they decided our marriages were worth a few $100s a month. Time to show them what war looks like. That afternoon, I met with Elias to discuss the restraining order hearing scheduled for the next day. The good news is that Rina's claims are pretty thin, he said, reviewing his notes. No specific threats, no evidence of actual intimidation, just general claims about feeling unsafe. What's the bad news? The bad news is that judges err on the side of caution with these things. Even if we get the order dismissed, the process gives her time to establish her narrative. Speaking of narrative, I have some new allies. I told him about Patricia Ashford's offer to testify, Mason's desire to go public, and Calla's evidence packet. Elias whistled. This is getting complicated. Multiple divorces, potential criminal charges, workplace violations, public relations battles. Finn, are you sure you want to escalate this far? Elias, they escalated it. They spent months planning and executing a conspiracy that destroyed 2 marriages and corrupted at least 4 people. I'm just making sure there are consequences. All right. But we need to be smart about this. If we're going to fight on multiple fronts, we need to coordinate our attacks. He pulled out a legal pad, started sketching a timeline. First, we get the restraining order dismissed. That frees you up to take more direct action. Second, we support Patricia's complaint to MedTech and make sure Richard faces professional consequences. Third, we use Calla's evidence to strengthen our civil case. Fourth, we coordinate with Mason on public disclosure. What about Rina's divorce filing? That's where it gets interesting. If we can prove she committed adultery, used marital assets to fund the affair, and engaged in conspiracy to defraud you of your rights as a husband, we can not only defend against her claims, but potentially pursue damages. Damages? Alienation of affection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to commit fraud. Minnesota law allows for some creative approaches when there's clear evidence of deliberate wrongdoing. My phone rang. Janet Morrison from MedTech HR. Mr. Harlow, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've completed our preliminary review, and I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we initially thought. How so? We found evidence that Mr. Ashford used company credit cards for personal expenses related to the affair. Hotel rooms charged to the company, restaurant bills, even gifts purchased with corporate accounts. We're talking about potential embezzlement. The implications hit me immediately. If Richard had been stealing from the company to fund his affair with my wife, this wasn't just adultery anymore. It was criminal fraud. What happens now? We're terminating Mr. Ashford effective immediately and referring the matter to law enforcement. We're also conducting a secondary investigation into Mrs. Harlow's knowledge of and participation in the misuse of company funds. After hanging up, I sat in Elias's office, processing the magnitude of what was unfolding. What had started as a marriage betrayal was becoming a criminal matter involving multiple felonies. Elias, this changes everything. Yes, it does. If Richard goes down for embezzlement and if Rina knew about it or benefited from it, she could be facing criminal charges too. What does that do to her restraining order, her divorce filing? It makes her look a lot less sympathetic. Hard to claim you're a victim when you're potentially an accomplice to corporate theft. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Check your email. Patricia found something big. The email contained scanned documents, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and what appeared to be jewelry purchase records, all charged to MedTech corporate accounts, all corresponding to dates when Richard and Rina were together. The attached note from Patricia was brief. Richard bought your wife a $3,000 necklace with company money. Thought you should know. I showed the documents to Elias. His expression grew more serious as he reviewed each page. Finn, this isn't just adultery anymore. This is organized criminal activity. Richard was essentially stealing from his company to fund an affair with your wife, and she was accepting stolen goods. Can we use this in the restraining order hearing? We can use this to get the restraining order dismissed and probably get Rina arrested. The question is whether you want to go that far. I thought about Rina's smug confidence when she filed the restraining order, her certainty that she could control the situation and make me look like the villain. I thought about the months of lies, the corruption of our friends, the systematic destruction of everything I'd believed about my marriage. Elias, I want to go that far. I want to go further than that. What do you mean? I mean it's time for everyone to understand what kind of people they've been dealing with, and time for Rina and Richard to learn what real consequences look like. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, reviewing all the evidence we'd accumulated. Phone records, bank statements, corporate theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, enough to destroy multiple lives and send people to prison. Tomorrow's restraining order hearing was going to be very interesting. My phone rang. Mason. Finn, turn on Channel 7 News. You're going to want to see this. I flipped on the television just in time to catch a breaking news story. Local executive fired for corporate theft, affair with subordinate. Richard's photo filled the screen as the anchor described the investigation, the embezzlement charges, and the ongoing criminal referral. They didn't name Rina, but anyone who knew about the affair would be able to connect the dots. How did this get to the media so fast? I asked Mason. Patricia Ashford has friends at the station. Turns out she's been volunteering there for years, helping with their community outreach programs. She leaked it? She made sure the public had access to information they deserved to know. There's a difference. I had to admire Patricia's approach. She wasn't just going after Richard privately. She was making sure the entire community understood what kind of man he really was. Mason, what about Calla? Has she seen this? Oh, she's seen it. Called me crying. begging me to help her figure out what to do. Apparently, she's worried about being charged as an accomplice. What did you tell her? I told her she should have thought about that before she decided to take money to help destroy our marriages. The news story continued with footage of MedTech's headquarters, interviews with company officials, and a statement from the district attorney's office about the ongoing investigation. Richard Ashford's career wasn't just over, it was publicly destroyed, and if the criminal charges stuck, his freedom was in jeopardy too. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. R. Rina was apparently watching the news too, and she was apparently not ready to surrender. I forwarded the text to Elias with a note. Evidence of continued harassment despite restraining order she filed? His response came back immediately. Perfect. See you in court tomorrow. Tomorrow's hearing was going to be very interesting indeed. The courthouse steps felt like a battlefield as I walked up them at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the restraining order hearing. Elias waited at the top, briefcase in hand, wearing the expression of a lawyer who was about to enjoy himself. Ready for this? He asked. More than ready. Good, because we've got company. He nodded toward the parking lot, where I spotted Rina getting out of a black sedan with Patricia Goldman, her attorney. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in Rina's posture, the way she kept glancing around like she expected cameras or reporters. She looks nervous, I observed. She should be. Wait until you see what else we have. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat behind the defendant's table and watched as more people filed in than I'd expected for a simple restraining order hearing. Patricia Ashford sat in the gallery with Tommy, both of them carrying folders of documents. Mason was there too, along with Janet Morrison from MedTech HR. Judge Margaret Chen called the court to order at exactly 9 a.m. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every domestic relations trick in the book. We're here for a temporary restraining order filed by Rina Harlow against Finn Harlow. Ms. Goldman, present your case. Patricia Goldman stood, adjusting her expensive suit. Your Honor, my client fears for her safety due to her husband's increasingly erratic and threatening behavior. Mr. Harlow has been stalking her, harassing her at work, and making threats against her and her associates. She presented a timeline of alleged incidents: my visit to MedTech HR, my meeting with Patricia Ashford, even my conversation with Calla at the park, all presented as evidence of harassment and intimidation. Your Honor, Mrs. Harlow simply wants to feel safe while she navigates the difficult process of ending her marriage to an increasingly unstable man. Judge Chen reviewed the paperwork, then looked at Elias. Mr. Corvin, your response? Elias stood, and I could see him suppressing a smile. Your Honor, this restraining order is not only baseless, it's part of a calculated attempt to obstruct justice and interfere with ongoing criminal investigations. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of documents. Mrs. Harlow and her paramour, Richard Ashford, have been engaged in a conspiracy involving adultery, embezzlement, and fraud. Mr. Harlow's actions weren't harassment. They were the legitimate efforts of a crime victim to seek justice. Patricia Goldman objected. Your Honor, these are unsubstantiated allegations. Actually, they're not. Elias handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. These are corporate credit card records showing that Richard Ashford stole approximately $15,000 from his employer to fund his affair with Mrs. Harlow. These are bank records showing payments to accomplices. And these are text messages between the conspirators planning their deception. Judge Chen's expression grew more serious as she reviewed the documents. Ms. Goldman, were you aware of these allegations when you filed this restraining order? Your Honor, my client's safety concerns are separate from any other legal matters. Mr. Corvin, do you have evidence that Mrs. Harlow knew about the alleged embezzlement? Elias smiled. We do, Your Honor. He produced photos of jewelry, receipts, and credit card statements. This $3,000 necklace was purchased by Richard Ashford using company funds and given to Mrs. Harlow. She was photographed wearing it at multiple events. She knew the source of the funds and accepted stolen property. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of papers as Judge Chen reviewed the evidence. When she looked up, her expression was grim. Ms. Goldman, this restraining order appears to be an attempt to interfere with a criminal investigation. Your client is potentially facing charges for receiving stolen property and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your Honor, I'm dismissing the restraining order immediately. Judge Chen's voice was firm. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential perjury charges related to the false statements in this filing. Patricia Goldman's face went pale. Rina looked like she was about to be sick. Your Honor, Elias continued, we'd like to request a restraining order against Mrs. Harlow. She sent threatening text messages to my client last night, despite having filed for protection herself. He handed over copies of Rina's threatening text. Judge Chen read it, shook her head. Granted. Mrs. Harlow, you are hereby restrained from contacting, threatening, or harassing Mr. Harlow in any way. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of justice being served. Rina walked past without making eye contact, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. Outside on the courthouse steps, Patricia Ashford approached me. Mr. Harlow, I wanted you to know that the District Attorney's Office called this morning. They're filing formal charges against Richard today. Embezzlement, fraud, theft of corporate assets. He's looking at 5 to 10 years. What about Rina? They're still investigating her level of involvement, but accepting stolen property is a felony, and if they can prove she knew the source of the funds, she shrugged. She could be facing serious time herself. Mason joined our group, grinning for the first time in days. Did you guys see the news coverage outside? Channel 7 has cameras set up, and they're interviewing people about corporate corruption and workplace affairs. I looked toward the street, where indeed a news van was parked with its satellite dish extended. A reporter was setting up for what appeared to be a live broadcast. This is getting very public, Tommy observed. Good, Patricia said firmly. People deserve to know what kind of individuals they've been dealing with. Richard represented himself as a family man, a community leader, a trustworthy executive. The community has a right to know the truth. My phone buzzed with a call from Janet Morrison. Mr. Harlow, I wanted to update you on the company investigation. We've terminated Mrs. Harlow as well. Her knowledge of the embezzlement and her participation in the scheme makes her continued employment impossible. What about the criminal charges? We're cooperating fully with law enforcement. The evidence is overwhelming. Richard stole money to fund the affair, and your wife was a knowing beneficiary. The district attorney seems confident about prosecution. After hanging up, I realized that in less than 24 hours, both Rina and Richard had lost their jobs, faced criminal charges, and been publicly exposed. The systematic destruction of their carefully constructed lives was happening faster than I'd imagined possible. Finn, Elias said, we need to talk about next steps. With the restraining order dismissed and criminal charges pending, you're in a very strong position for the divorce proceedings. But there are some decisions to make. What kind of decisions? How far you want to push this? We could pursue maximum damages, force asset forfeiture, make sure she loses everything. Or we could focus on a clean separation and let the criminal justice system handle the punishment. I looked around at the group that had assembled to support me, Patricia, Mason, Tommy, Elias, all people who'd been hurt by Rina and Richard's conspiracy, all seeking some form of justice. What do you think, Mason? You're dealing with the same situation. Mason was quiet for a moment. I think they made their choices, and now they get to live with the consequences. All of them. Patricia? I think people who abuse trust and hurt innocent people should face the full weight of their actions. Richard destroyed our family, put our children through trauma, and stole money to do it. He deserves everything that's coming to him. A reporter approached our group. "Excuse me, are you the husband who exposed the embezzlement scheme?" Before I could answer, Patricia stepped forward. "We're the families who were victimized by Richard Ashford and his accomplices. We're here to make sure justice is served." The reporter's eyes lit up. "Would you be willing to do an interview? Our viewers are very interested in this story." I looked at Elias, who nodded slightly. "What would you want to know? How did you discover the affair? What was it like learning your wife was involved in corporate theft? What do you want to see happen to the people responsible?" Standing there on the courthouse steps, with cameras rolling and the community watching, I realized this was my chance to make sure the truth was told. Not Rina's version, not Richard's spin, but the actual facts about what they'd done to multiple families. "I'd be happy to tell you the truth," I said. "All of it." The interview lasted 20 minutes. I explained the months of suspicion, the discovery of the affair, the revelation of the embezzlement scheme, and the systematic way Rina and Richard had corrupted everyone around them to cover their tracks. The reporter was particularly interested in Calla's role as paid accomplice and the way the conspiracy had destroyed multiple marriages simultaneously. "What do you want people to understand about this situation?" she asked. "I want them to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't lie, cheat, steal, and hurt people without eventually facing justice. And I want other families to know that if they're dealing with similar situations, they're not alone and they don't have to accept being treated badly." After the cameras stopped rolling, Patricia approached me. "That was well done. You stayed factual, didn't get emotional, let the evidence speak for itself. What happens now?" "Now we wait for the criminal justice system to do its work, and we make sure our civil cases are airtight." Mason joined us. "Finn, I've been thinking about what you said, about consequences and accountability. I want to file charges against Calla, too." "For what?" "Conspiracy to commit fraud. She took money to help deceive us, to help cover up crimes. That makes her an accessory." Elias nodded. "It's possible. If we can prove she knew about the embezzlement and helped cover it up in exchange for payment, that could be criminal conspiracy." "Do it," Mason said firmly. "I'm tired of people thinking they can hurt others without facing real consequences." That afternoon, I sat in my hotel room watching the news coverage of the day's events. The story had expanded beyond just the courthouse hearing. Reporters had tracked down Richard's neighbors, interviewed MedTech employees, even found people who'd worked with Rina at community events. The picture that emerged was damning. Richard portrayed as a manipulative executive who'd abused his position and stolen company funds. Rina described as a calculating woman who'd knowingly participated in fraud to fund her affair. Calla characterized as a mercenary who'd sold out her friends for money. My phone rang. Tommy. "Finn, you need to see the evening news. Channel 9 just ran a follow-up story." I switched channels just in time to catch a segment titled "The Web of Deception: How a Suburban Affair Became a Criminal Conspiracy." The reporter had done her homework. She'd found court records, interviewed former colleagues, even spoken with people who'd attended the same social events as Rina and Richard. The story painted a picture of systematic deception that had been going on for months, affecting multiple families and involving significant financial crimes. "The question now," the reporter concluded, "is how many other people were affected by this conspiracy and whether there are additional crimes yet to be discovered." As if on cue, my phone rang with a call from Janet Morrison. "Mr. Harlow, I wanted to give you a heads up. Our investigation has expanded. We've found evidence that this may not have been Richard's first affair, and there may be other employees who were involved in covering up his activities." "How many other people?" "We're still investigating, but it looks like Richard had a pattern of inappropriate relationships with subordinates, and he may have been using company resources to fund them for years. Your wife might not have been his first victim." The implications were staggering. If Richard had been running multiple affairs, using corporate theft to fund them, and involving employees in cover-ups. This could be a massive criminal enterprise. What does that mean for the charges against him? It means they're going to get a lot more serious. We're talking about potential racketeering charges, organized criminal activity, multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. After hanging up, I realized that what had started as a simple case of adultery had become something much larger. Richard and Rina hadn't just betrayed their spouses, they'd been part of a criminal organization that had been operating for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Turn on Channel 7, Calla's doing an interview." I switched channels to find Calla sitting across from a reporter, tears streaming down her face, telling her side of the story. "I was just trying to help a friend," she was saying. "I never knew about the stolen money, never knew I was part of anything criminal. I thought I was just providing alibis for a friend who was having marital problems." The reporter pressed her. "But you were paid substantial amounts of money for these alibis. Didn't that seem suspicious?" "I needed the money. My hours had been cut, we were struggling financially. When Rina offered to pay me for small favors, it seemed like a blessing." "What do you want people to understand about your role in this?" "I want them to understand that I'm a victim too. I was manipulated by people I trusted, used as a tool in their criminal scheme. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." I turned off the television, disgusted. Even now, faced with criminal charges and public humiliation, Calla was trying to paint herself as a victim rather than taking responsibility for her choices. My phone rang. "Elias. Did you see Calla's interview?" "Unfortunately. Good news is that she just admitted on television to taking money in exchange for providing false alibis. That's basically a confession to conspiracy charges. What's the bad news?" "The bad news is that she's trying to get ahead of the story, control the narrative, maybe even negotiate a plea deal by portraying herself as a victim." "Can she do that?" "She can try, but the evidence against her is pretty strong, and her television confession doesn't help her case." That evening, I had dinner with Patricia, Mason, and Tommy at a quiet restaurant outside of town. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could relax, like the weight of deception and betrayal was finally lifting. "So, what happens next?" Mason asked. Patricia smiled grimly. "Next, we watch Richard and Rina learn what it's like to face real consequences for their actions. Criminal trials, civil suits, public humiliation, financial ruin. Everything they put us through, but worse." "What about rebuilding?" Tommy asked. "At some point, you guys need to move forward with your own lives." I thought about that. For months, I'd been focused on discovering the truth, seeking justice, making sure there were consequences. But eventually, this chapter would end, and I'd need to figure out what came next. "First things first," I said. "I want to see this through to the end. I want to make sure everyone involved faces appropriate consequences. Then I'll worry about rebuilding." Mason raised his glass. "To consequences. To justice," Patricia added. "To the truth finally coming out," Tommy concluded. We drank to all of it: consequences, justice, truth, and the hope that our actions would prevent other families from going through what we'd experienced. Outside the restaurant, as we prepared to go our separate ways, Patricia pulled me aside. "Finn, I want you to know that what you did, exposing this, fighting back, refusing to be a victim, it gave me the strength to do the same. Richard thought he could destroy our family and walk away without consequences. He was wrong. What's next for you?" "Next, I make sure he loses everything: the house, the retirement accounts, the reputation, the freedom, everything he valued more than his family." As I drove back to my hotel, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. A week ago, I'd been a suspicious husband, wondering if his wife was cheating. Tonight, I was part of a criminal investigation that had destroyed multiple careers and was heading toward multiple felony convictions. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new revelations, new consequences for the people who'd thought they could lie, cheat, and steal without facing justice. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the federal courthouse downtown, watching as Richard Ashford was led up the steps in handcuffs. The local news crews were out in force. This had become the biggest white-collar crime story in the city's recent history. The investigation had expanded far beyond what any of us had imagined. Richard wasn't just an unfaithful husband who'd stolen money to fund an affair. He was the center of a criminal enterprise that had been operating for nearly 5 years. Multiple affairs, systematic embezzlement, a network of accomplices, and financial crimes totaling over $200,000. Rina was scheduled to be arraigned later that afternoon on charges of conspiracy, receiving stolen property, and accessory to embezzlement. The woman who'd tried to paint me as an abusive husband was now facing a potential 10-year prison sentence. "Quite a turnout," Patricia Ashford observed, joining me on the courthouse steps. She looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. Stronger, more determined, like someone who'd found her purpose. "Any word on Richard's plea negotiations?" "His lawyer's trying to work out a deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested. Too much evidence, too many victims, too much public attention." She smiled grimly. "Richard's going to trial, and he's going to lose." Mason approached from across the street, carrying a folder of documents. "Just came from my lawyer's office. Calla's attorney wants to discuss a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" "The kind where she admits fault, agrees to asset forfeiture, and accepts responsibility for her role in the conspiracy." Mason's expression was grim satisfaction. Apparently, her television interview didn't help her legal position. Inside the courthouse, we took seats in the gallery for Richard's arraignment. The man who'd walked into my living room 3 weeks ago with confidence and arrogance now looked broken, defeated, like someone who'd finally realized the magnitude of his mistakes. The prosecutor read the charges: 17 counts of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence was overwhelming: corporate credit card records, hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, cash advances, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Richard's attorney entered a plea of not guilty, but everyone in the courtroom knew it was a formality. The evidence was too strong, the case too airtight. Judge Williams set a trial date for 6 months out, denied bail due to flight risk, and remanded Richard to federal custody pending trial. As the bailiff led Richard away, he looked back at the gallery. His eyes found mine for just a moment, and I saw something I hadn't expected, not anger or hatred, but resignation. He knew his life was over. 2 hours later, it was Rina's turn. She entered the courtroom with Patricia Goldman, both women looking like they'd aged years in the past few weeks. The confident, calculating woman who'd filed a restraining order against me was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened. The charges against Rina were slightly less severe than Richard's, but still serious: conspiracy to commit fraud, receiving stolen property, accessory to embezzlement, and perjury related to the restraining order filing. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty, but the prosecutor made it clear that plea negotiations were possible if Rina was willing to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation. As we left the courthouse, Elias pulled me aside. "Finn, Rina's attorney called this morning. She wants to meet with you." "What for?" "To discuss a settlement of the civil matters. She's willing to give you everything: the house, the cars, her retirement accounts, everything, in exchange for your agreement not to pursue additional damages." "What do you think?" "I think she's terrified of going to trial and wants to minimize her exposure. The criminal charges are bad enough, but if we pursue civil damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, alienation of affection, and conspiracy, we could bankrupt her completely." I thought about it. The house where Rina had entertained her lover, the cars they'd driven to their secret meetings, the retirement accounts she'd planned to use for her future with Richard, all of it tainted by betrayal and crime. Set up the meeting, but Elias? I want Mason and Patricia there too. This affected all of us. The meeting took place the next day in Elias's conference room. Rina sat across from me, flanked by Patricia Goldman and a criminal defense attorney. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. "Finn," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far." "You never intended to get caught?" "That's not—" She stopped, seemed to gather herself. "I know you hate me. I know you think I'm a terrible person. Maybe I am. But I want to try to make this right." Patricia Goldman slid a document across the table. "Mrs. Harlow is prepared to transfer all marital assets to your client. The house, vehicles, bank accounts, retirement funds, everything. In exchange, Mr. Harlow agrees not to pursue civil damages." Elias reviewed the document. "This is everything?" "Everything," Rina confirmed. "I just want this to be over." I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 12 years, trying to reconcile her with the person who'd systematically betrayed me for 8 months. The calculating manipulator was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely broken. "What about accountability?" Patricia Ashford asked. "What about the other families you destroyed?" Rina turned to her. "Mrs. Ashford, I know I can't undo what I did to your family. If I could take it back— But you can't, and you wouldn't if you hadn't been caught." Patricia's voice was steel. "You helped my husband steal money from his company. You participated in a criminal conspiracy. You destroyed multiple marriages for your own gratification. I know I did terrible things, but I can't change that now." Mason spoke up. "What about Calla? What about the way you corrupted our friend, turned her into an accomplice?" "I was wrong. I was selfish and wrong, and I'm sorry." The apologies felt hollow, performative, like something her lawyers had coached her to say. But the asset transfer was real, substantial, and immediate. "Finn," Elias said quietly, "this is a generous offer. You'd walk away with everything, free and clear, no ongoing litigation." I studied Rina's face, looking for some sign of genuine remorse, some indication that she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. What I saw instead was calculation. She was still trying to minimize her losses, still trying to control the outcome. "I'll take the assets," I said finally, "but I have conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you write letters of apology to Mason, to Patricia, to everyone whose life you helped destroy. Real apologies, taking full responsibility." "Okay." "Second, you cooperate fully with the criminal investigation. No plea bargains that let you avoid responsibility." "Finn, third, you stay away from me, from Mason, from Patricia, from everyone connected to this situation, permanently." Rina was quiet for a long moment. Then, "And if I agree to all of this, you won't pursue additional civil damages?" "That's right." She looked at her lawyers, who nodded slightly. "Okay. I agree." The paperwork took 2 hours to complete. By the end of it, I owned everything Rina and I had built together during our marriage. The house felt like a hollow victory. I wasn't sure I'd ever want to live there again, but the financial security was real. As we prepared to leave, Rina approached me one last time. "Finn, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I did love you once. Before all of this, I really did love you." I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. "Rina, if you'd loved me, none of this would have happened." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. 6 months later, I sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse for Richard's sentencing hearing. He'd been convicted on all 17 counts after a trial that had dominated local news for weeks. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. He would also be required to pay full restitution to MedTech and forfeit all assets obtained through criminal activity. Patricia sat beside me, holding her teenage daughter's hand. The divorce had been finalized the month before, with Patricia receiving everything: the house, custody of the children, all financial assets. "How do you feel?" I asked her as Richard was led away in shackles. "Like justice was served, like my children can finally understand that actions have consequences." She smiled sadly. "It doesn't undo the damage, but it helps." Rina had pled guilty to reduced charges and received 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She was scheduled to report to federal custody the following week. Mason's divorce from Calla had been finalized as well. She'd avoided criminal charges by cooperating with the investigation, but she'd lost everything else: her marriage, her reputation, her financial security. "Any regrets?" Mason asked as we left the courthouse. I thought about it. The past 8 months had been the most difficult of my life, but also the most clarifying. I'd learned who I really was when everything fell apart, and I'd discovered that I was stronger than I'd known. No regrets about seeking justice. But I do regret that it took so long to see who Rina really was. What's next for you? I looked up at the courthouse steps, where this whole legal journey had begun 8 months earlier, with a restraining order hearing that had backfired spectacularly on my ex-wife. Next, I rebuild. New house, new life, new relationships with people who understand that honesty matters. As we walked away from the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: genuine optimism about the future. The lies were exposed, the criminals were punished, and the truth had finally prevailed. Behind us, the courthouse stood as a monument to justice served. Ahead of us lay the possibility of lives rebuilt on foundations of honesty and integrity. For the first time in months, I was looking forward instead of backward. The underdog had taken control, and the flight home had finally begun.